Okay, so Richard, let's start with you. Thank you so much for coming here today. So you've done numerology for a very long time. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what brought you to this field?
Okay, so yeah, it was a long time ago. Very brief, it's a long story, but very briefly, I went to a psychic fair in Northampton in November 1989. And I wanted to have a tarot reading, but I couldn't have a tarot reading. So I ended up having a numerology reading with this old guy. And he said I was a number 3. And he told me about what that meant, about my personality and my character. And I sat and listened to him and paid him the £10 at the end of it and took the tape from him. And I said, very interesting, mate. You're a nice guy, but it doesn't, what you said doesn't work. You've described number 3. You're saying I'm a number 3. I'm not that person. You've got it wrong. And he turned around and said, yeah, you're not that person, are you? And how's that working out for you? And it took me a while, but the truth was it wasn't working out for me. So he'd shown me a blueprint, my number 3, which I wasn't being. I wasn't being my number. And my life was absolutely terrible. I thought, I've got nothing to lose. So I tried to be my number, and I haven't looked back since. So that's really how I came to it. I wasn't a believer, and then I was.
That's how it starts, though, isn't it? With most. So how have you seen? How has it affected your life? How has it affected your life altogether? Have you seen? Do you see any correlation between your life path, your number, and how your life has turned out?
I couldn't live without numerology now. Yeah, so somebody a little while ago said to me, oh yeah, this is very interesting, numerology, but you don't run your life by it, do you? They said. And I wasn't confident, and I said, no, of course I don't run my life by it. But I totally run my life by it, is what I should have said. I totally run my life by it. And I think now, in 2019, what it has done for me is it's enabled me to recognise that there are definitely forces at work in the world, on our planet, in the universe, that are beyond what we can see. They're beyond what the news reports. They're beyond what science knows. And I don't mean that in any freaky or disruptive or scary kind of way, but years and years and years of doing this numerology proves to me that there is such a thing as the gods. There's forces which are affecting and influencing the world and our life, and it's absolutely real, and it's not freaky or scary when you understand it. But there's higher forces at work than what we can see. That's really where I am with it now. So it gives me hope, really, with all the stuff that's going on in the world, that actually there's a bigger picture. There's something else going on beyond what the news report says, beyond what the facts that we have are. And I don't, as I say, I don't mean it in a freaky, disturbing way. I just mean it in a higher way, really.
Wow. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just go back and forth with the questions as Steve, what about you? So you've been doing astrology for 40 years now. How did you get into it, and what was the reason?
I left home when I was 15. Joined the army because it was the only way out of home when you were 15 back in the late 60s, early 70s. And the army ran a load of tests on me and found out I was really good with codes and ciphers. And then when I was 19, I got caught with a very large cigarette at Reading Pop Festival. and that was the end of my army experiences. So I dropped out of the army in 1975, and in 1976, 77, someone showed me an ephemeris, which is like a bus timetable, but it's all the planet positions instead of the bus positions. And I started recognizing patterns, and I thought, this is just code. It's just a different type of code. And from there, I started building patterns. And then I realized I started building horoscopes, almost by accident. And I started translating them in 1980, and I started translating them correctly in 1981. And since that time, it's not consumed me or taken over my life, but it's really complemented me and enhanced my life. And as Richard said, it gives you an added extra insight into not only human behavior, but collective behavior and more than. And when you sense the higher mechanics behind the symbology, the pattern recognition, the psychology, when you sense the higher meaning behind it, it gives you an incentive and an insight into what's really going on in the world, and it gives you hope for the future. And at the moment, hope is in pretty short supply. So, Astrologos, knowledge of the stars, it is a cause for hope in this world, and I'm proud to be a catalyst for other people with this.
So this would be a question for you both. How would you explain, where do we stand between free will and destiny?
I have absolutely no truck with fate or destiny whatsoever. There is nothing written in stone. Everything is down to free will. We all have choice. There is nothing that can convince me that anything is fated. And if anyone says to me, you must do this, you will do that, I'll go, no, I have free will, I have choice. And it is a human right to have free will and free choice. We can all choose to go against our programming. For astrology, the planets impel, they don't compel. The planetary positions at any given time, whether it's just in the horoscope in the sky or whether it's relating to your own personal chart, they give you really good timings and ideas and potentials. And if you use it, then your life moves a lot smoother and a lot easier, and you get better results. But you can choose not to use it. You can go against it. And if you do, then sure, some things still work, but it's much harder work. So I'm a free will all the way down the line. What about you?
Yeah, similar. How can I say it? I'm a bit more. Numbers don't compel; they impel. Same as planets, I think. But I just think that it's almost like, you start here, wherever here is, and you've got to get to here, right? So you start here, and that's where you've got to get to. Whatever, individual, family, group, society, whatever it might be. You start here, you've got to get to here. And I think that, to a large extent, you will get there, wherever that is. It will happen. The difference is whether you go like that to get there, or whether you go like that to get there. That's the free will aspect. But I think that you get there. And I think that, so it's a bit more messy in individual lives. I think that in global affairs, big things that happen, I think that it's not fate as such, but I don't see how some of the things that have happened in the past few years, I don't see how they ever were not going to happen. If we think about things that happened in 2016, maybe, I don't see that there was ever a way that they were not going to happen. So, free will, yeah, but then maybe sometimes there's a hand which kind of says, actually, guys, this has to happen.
Cause and effect?
Maybe, yeah. So I think we broadly agree.
Yeah, that's pretty much my understanding from it. So it's kind of like, say for example, as a soul, I'm looking at, you know, the potential lives I can have, and if I feel that, for example, from my experience in this life, I really want to be a healer. I want to heal people. So I can do this through a number of ways, right? I can be a nurse. I can do that as working as a pianist, because you can heal with music, right? So you can do that in a number of different ways. So is that what you kind of mean? You're still experiencing that end point, but you're experiencing.
I mean, I think to put it, yes, but to put it, well, perhaps if I say it differently, to put it more positively, if I do think that the universe is trying to guide us. I am not a hippie in any sense of the word at all, but I do believe that. I do believe that the universe is trying to get us to be where we need to be. So the free will factor is what notice do we take of the nudges that the universe gives us? I think that's the key. And maybe one person will get nudged once in a certain direction and they'll be off down in that direction, and they'll be doing their thing very quickly and early on in life. But maybe for some of the rest of us, it takes multiple nudges, and then more than nudges, shoves, and then maybe more than shoves before we get the message that actually we should do X, Y, Z. And that's where it's different for everybody, and it's not straightforward. But I do think the universe is essentially kind of beneficial if we could but take notice of the signs.
In a similar but different vein, there's a point in the horoscope called the North Node, which comes from Hindu astrology around the 1890s. And with it came the Hindu astrology translation of that as to do with reincarnation and karma, which worked when you lived in a culture where there was absolute abject poverty and no hope of anything better except possibly a better life next time. But in recent years, just in the last decade or so, an astrological understanding has occurred in this that says, no, actually, this idea of past lives and future lives doesn't really work anymore. It's just a transition of consciousness from one dimension of space and time to another. And instead of looking at karma, which kind of puts the responsibility elsewhere, we should be looking at things like mission statement, purpose, and reason why we volunteered to come to planet Earth in the first place, which puts the responsibility purely on oneself. Why did you volunteer to come here? And we, as not so much healers, but catalysts who empower other people into their own strength, can actually help people find their own course to navigate, as Richard said, the most simple and direct way to the reason why they volunteered to come here in the first place. Is that a fair comment?
Anything that helps us to take responsibility for where we're at and what we've got to do has got to be a good thing, and then you can kind of say, well, whatever your circumstances, whatever your situation is, there's a good in it somewhere. And I know how that can be interpreted if your circumstances are really not very good, but there's a good in it somewhere. And I'm really not a hippie at all. So to me to say this is a big thing. But I do think there's a good in everything. And even if your situation is not very favourable, and you might say, oh, I've got some bad karma here, actually there's a good in it, and there's a good that can come out of it. And I've seen this in my own life, and I've seen it with all the many of the clients I've had.
So how can people learn about their specific purpose, why they came here using astrology and numerology? Because, so for example, Richard, you gave me a short reading, and that for me that was so spot on, and for me it just confirmed so many things that I was having doubts on. So for example, one of the main things for life path number 7, which is mine, is basically that you need grounding, and you need a lot of grounding, and you have ideas, but you need to ground them. And that, for me, so just to give you an example, when I was putting this event together, I had a lot of ideas about it, but it's like something was missing. I was just finding it hard to put it together. And before, I just used to think, what's wrong with me? You know, why can't I just be like a normal person and just finish it and just you know, put it into practice? And having someone external to me confirm these things and say, look, these are the strengths that come with your life path number. These are the weaknesses. You just need to work more on your weaknesses and, you know, need to make them work together. And for me, that was almost like okay, so there's nothing wrong with me. It's just, you know, and I'm not saying that I'm passing the blame onto my life path number, not at all. I am taking full responsibility of what I'm doing. But it is within the nature of this reality that we just have to work with these energies, and all of these energies have positives and negatives, right? So how can this help people basically in their own lives to understand what they're supposed to be doing here, what their path is?
So, so numerology is all rooted in the ancient Greeks. So it goes back to Pythagoras. So if you remember at school, you probably learnt the Pythagoras theorem, which is the sum of the angles of a right-angled triangle, blah, blah, blah. Numerology's got nothing to do with that, but that's what Pythagoras is remembered for, being a mathematician. He was a mystic. Pythagoras was a mystic. And his mysticism was based on the idea of opposites and ends of the spectrum. So it's very important what you said there, which is that one of the key things I always say in all the kinds of people that I meet, and I meet all kinds of people all the time, is that there's nothing wrong with you. And that is really hippie new age, but it's so true. There's nothing wrong with you. But what's probably going on with almost everybody is that they are, if you like, overweighted in certain things and therefore underweighted in other things. And that's not a positive and a negative as such. It's just that it's like you're good at some sports and therefore not good at other sports. Or you could do certain yoga poses, but therefore you can't do other certain yoga poses. And so 7 is about of the mind, as an example. It's about of the mind. So it follows naturally that if somebody is of the mind, then they are perhaps going to need assistance in not being so much of the mind and to get it down from their mind and into reality. So it's not like a positive and a negative. It's just there's ends of the spectrum. And everybody's got spectrums which they're kind of bobbing between.
That makes a lot of sense. And Steve, what about with astrology? How can people use their astrological signs, their ascending, descending, to learn more about themselves?
Every single horoscope is different. Every single person is different. Note, even identical twins born within 2 or 3 minutes of each other have different horoscopes, only minutely, but different. And over a period of time, that difference becomes more evident. And you can never... Sometimes you can look at a horoscope and you can see that someone's probably going to live a long time. Or that someone is going to be more of an academic than they are an intuitive. Or that they really need to live by the seaside and they should avoid alcohol. And you can see these things and you can suggest them to the person, and they normally resonate with them because they know it at some level within themselves anyway. It's just nice to have it objectively confirmed. And ideally, when you do a reading for someone, you know nothing of them at all, at least on the first time, so that you can actually give them going completely cold, and that way you get the best results, because it's a kind of kidology. I don't want to demean my art, but it is a bit of kidology, because if you can hit people, if you can surprise people with facets of their understandings of their own nature in a way that you couldn't possibly know if it weren't for the horoscope, then they will pay that some credence, and then they will go away and work on that and make a difference to their lives in some shape or form and become better human beings. And then, of course, their world becomes better, and then it spreads into the world. One of my all-time favourite books is Illusions by Richard Bach. And one of the great lines in there is, argue enough your limitations and sure enough they're yours. You know, you can con yourself or kid yourself into anything. I can't do that. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it. And yet the other side of the story is it's better to try and fail than not to try at all. And the more you try, the more successful you become. So all of these things, all of these divinatory art forms, they're guides, they're helpers. But at the end of the day, it is down to you. And anyone who says to me, well, that wasn't a very good reading, and I say, well, okay, here's your money back then. But very few people say that, because anyone who gets to the point of coming to a numerologist or an astrologer, a serious numerologist or serious astrologer for help, already has a level of intelligence that says they want to work with this type of energy and improve their life. They don't just want to be bedazzled.
Can I, because 100% to that, because numerology also recognises that everybody's unique. Deep numerology recognises everybody's unique. And a big part of it is that, which actually sometimes doesn't go down very well when people experience this, but a big part of it is that what we say, the person already knows. They don't know that they know, and they only know it on some level, and they don't know it in the words that we've used, and they haven't got it in the order that we've presented it, but they kind of know it, and if they don't know it, then that is much more difficult. But most people will know already, and it's the having it objectively confirmed, reminded, that's the key that unlocks things. And you can't, that won't work if you're telling them something that actually isn't true. So it has to be truthfully resonant within the person for the kind of door to be unlocked. And when it is, then it is.
Authenticity.
Yeah, that's the word. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's almost like you're working with the flow rather than against it, because you understand now what energies you can use and how you can use them, right? It's pretty much... and I'm surprised, again, with astrology, how down to, you know, the childhood and all the everything that's happened, down to the emotional and psychological issues, like with the reading that you gave me, Steve, that was just, I mean, the level of detail is just like, it's really crazy how detailed it is and how much you can tell about a person. But at the same time, there is room for, you know, for example, if there was something in my astrological chart about not having great relationships or anything like that, that could be you know, with work, that could be friendships, that could be love, that could be family, right? It doesn't have to be exactly in the way that it is, in the way that it's written in the chart. It's just that there's so many variations of it, and I guess it's down to your free will whether you know, your relationships pan out in the same way or you work more with them.
For a long time in my studies of astrology, I rebelled against anything that began with the word psyche, whether it was psychiatry, psychology, psychic, or anything, because I thought, no, that's just academic waffle, and it's designed to sort of confuse people. But the more I've got into astrology, the more I've recognized how psychology is actually a vital tool in human understanding, both of other people and of ourselves. And to my displeasure, but I have to accept the fact that more and more, especially just in the last 10 to 15 years, I've recognized how important the first 7 years of life are in every individual. So many times, sometimes you just, when you're dealing with a client, you know it's going to be difficult, you have to have a box of tissues nearby, because there's certain words like rejection, abandonment, things like that, which come up. And you have to be careful when you use these words, but when you do use them, you've got to be prepared for the reaction, because sometimes it's so obvious that these issues from childhood are still affecting them as an adult. And yes, you could encourage them to go and spend thousands of pounds over many years in counselling and therapy, or with the best of intentions, and as authentically as you can just go in like a sledgehammer and try and do it as quickly and as effectively as you can, and give them the power to actually recognize their own problems and work with them. So yes, it's amazing how much childhood affects everybody.
Absolutely. And I think it's important as well to stress, it's been said, that, that whatever our numbers, I'll just speak from the numbers point of view, whatever our numbers, we can change. We can improve. So even if you have a given set of numbers which incline you in a certain direction, and yeah, they're going to incline you in a certain direction, it's going to make you good at that, not so good at that, but we can improve. And I'm not naturally an optimist, but numerology has kind of taught me to be a bit more optimistic, because I've seen people work with what it's like playing cards. It's like playing poker. If you have a good hand, well, I've seen people play a good hand poorly and throw their cards away, and I've seen people play a crappy hand and play it well. So to some extent, what you're given, your soul blueprint, if you like, is part of the story, but it's how you play your hand that matters. Very important. Almost like the determining factor.
That's really insightful. Does anyone have any questions from the audience? No? Okay, I actually wanted to get to the bigger picture here and how, how does this relate with everything that's going on within the world today in terms of astrology?
No, I'll leave that one to you, but I'll give my little rant on that if I can.
Okay, go for it.
I study something called eschatology. Eschatology, in a nutshell, is the acceleration of evolution. And it sounds very poncy if I just say it like that. But when I was born, there was 2.1 billion people on this planet, and there's now 7+. So population on this planet has more than tripled in my lifetime. When I was born, new technology was a big brown wooden box with a little black and white moving screen, the new television thing. No one had ever seen it before. 10 years before, no one had televisions. And that was technology. When I was born, spirituality meant being marched off to Sunday school. That was it. Now we've got spiritual pick and mix at every street corner. We've got technology like you wouldn't believe. Technology, spirituality and population are all growing at such an accelerated rate. It's not a straight line graph curve, it's an escalatory graph curve. And it's approaching prime vertical. One of my best friends is a lady called Serena Roney-Dougal. She's the first person in the world to get a PhD in parapsychology. And she wrote a seminal book called Where Science and Magic Meet. And she pointed out that once a bacteria or a molecule gets invaded by a virus, the virus will consume the surface of that molecule, eat all of its resources, and then the host body and the virus will die. Or there's a mutation. And this always happens when the number of the virus compared to the one host body hits a certain number. And that number is 10 to the power of 10. 10 billion. Humanity is now at the power of 10 to the 9.7. And within the space of everyone's lifetime in this room, we will hit 10 billion people on this planet, at which I choose to believe that we will hit some type of singularity point, which will lead to us either a kind of breakthrough or a breakdown. I can't wait. I've been waiting all my life for this. And I just really look forward to seeing it. And everything on the astrological level suggests that this acceleration of evolution is still getting faster all the time, which is why so much intensity in individual lives and in the global world is happening now. This is how it makes sense to me. I don't expect you to believe me, but I can demonstrate the figures to prove this.
So, some people call me Cassandra. I don't mean out of Only Fools and Horses. I mean as in the I don't know what the mythology was. The person who could see the future and was never believed. So there's no reason why you should believe me either. But a lot of the things that are going on in the world and have gone on in the world in recent times, I saw them coming a long time ago. And there's no reason you should believe that, but it is true. And I have been very low in my feelings about the situation of the world. I've been very low about it. However, I'm not now, and I haven't been for a little while, because I realised what was always there. I've realised that the business of life is evolution, as Steve was saying. The business of life is evolution, and the business of life is not what would I like to happen? What would I not like to happen? That's not the business of life, and it never has been the business of life. It's never been the business of being alive. That's not what it is in the global sense. It's evolution. It's what is needed. It's what is necessary. What takes us forward. What wakes us up. What switches us on. And through all the things that have been going on the last few years, and I might say that will happen in the next few years, what comes out of it is a massive awakening. Not everybody, not everywhere, not all the time, but there is a massive, bigger than I thought it would be, waking up to something higher, something bigger. I mean, a lot of people have spoken about, for years have spoken about this thing called the New Age. You know, we're heading towards the New Age. Well, for sure. I was one of the ones that thought that the New Age could be constructed smoothly and without any difficulties whatsoever, which is, of course, not possible. In order to completely refurbish your house, you have to rip out everything that was in there before. And that's really where we're at. The house is being refurbished in every kind of level, in every kind of way, and it ain't going to go back to how it was. And when we're out the other end of it, things will be a lot better, but we've got to come out the other end of it first. That's my view. Evolution is the name of the game.
I use the analogy of being in the inside of a pencil sharpener, heading towards that narrow point at the end. And once you get to that minute little hole at the end and you get through that hole, then it's resplendent glory. But we may not get there, and that's the truth. It depends if we collectively as a species have that intelligence to actually run the planet the way that we collectively want it to be. More on that one later.
I think we actually will get there, but I think we'll not get there tomorrow.
So what's special about 2020 in terms of numbers?
So in terms of numbers, it's very simple. So we were all born, I think, yeah, we were all born in 19 something. Yeah, so we all are influenced by the number 1. We now live in 20-something, which is the number 2. Now, that sounds ridiculously simple and absurd, but it's a massive thing. We were born into the vibration of 1, and we now live in the vibration of 2. That's been the case since 2000. 2020 will be massive, because if you take the digits of any given year and add them together, then what you get out of that gives you a reading of the year. So 2020 add them all up gives you 4. Well, what's the big deal about that? But actually you can do a little trick and you can cut the zeros out and you can say actually it's a 22 year. In numerology, 22 is recognised to be a master number. So standing prediction, big stuff will go down in 2020. Transformation, the lid will blow off. 2016, that was a warm-up. 2020 is when the lid will blow towards the better place.
From the late 80s onwards, I was looking at the ephemerises and seeing the patterns of the planets as they move forward. and we were watching the last Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 1983, when Saturn and Pluto together moved into Scorpio, and we all said it's going to be nuclear war, and it wasn't. It was the end of nuclear war, and it was the start of the downfall of communism, and we also had HIV, a typical Scorpio thing at that stage. No one expected it. We went through various grand crosses, total eclipses in 1999 and 2012, the big Uranus-Neptune conjunction. It's all been escalating and building to 2020, and in early 2020, and I'll nail my colours to the mast here. Over the period of January the 11th to January the 13th, 2020, you heard it here first. There's some type of absolute intense configuration in the heavens, which in many ways summarises the last 30 or 40 years of intensity and growth. And this isn't the end big one, but it is to suggest that we're finally at that point where we change or we don't. And from the early 2030s onwards, there is nothing like the astrological intensity of the last 30 or 40 years and the next few years at all through to 2100, beyond everyone else's life here. So from an astrological perspective, it is now, and the next few years, that is going to see this nexus point of transcendence, where we will break down or break through. And one thing, with the movement of the planets, we can't influence this. This is going to happen. The planets will put us in this pattern, which we will be on the receiving end of. We can all take lots of nice drugs and pretend it's not happening and just dumb down if we want, but then not everyone can do that, and there will be some type of effect. So when I look at the patterns, both in the sky and in individual charts, and I see the different configurations, the numbers of the patterns, the triangles, the squares, the circles, the pattern recognition that makes everyone different and every moment of time different. Pattern recognition, you sense the evolution of patterns. And even more important than the pattern recognition, you sense the potential in these patterns for us to grab, shape, mould, dance with, and flow with, and to become more than we are. And that's what I'm pinning my hopes on, that the intelligence of humanity will put us through this shape-shifting, this time of human evolution that we're heading into.
If I may, so 100% to all of that, but this is where I think that it's really important to recognise that soul, if that's kind of what we're talking about, soul is an inside job as far as I'm concerned. So personally, well, let me just say where I am with it, and then you can make your own mind up about what you want to do. I've got a pretty good idea which way I think some of the world events are going to go. But I actually think it doesn't matter. And I think that it doesn't matter because the soul, individual souls have got to find their way. And individual souls can't wait for events in order to be able to find their way. We have to find our way so that events go in particular directions. And I think, and okay, it isn't that simple, and that could be debated, but I think what we shouldn't be doing, what I'm not doing, is waiting for events to go in a certain direction so that I can get my stuff together. That's not the answer. You have to get your stuff together regardless of what way events go. And I think that the way that some events will go, some people won't like it. So I think we don't want to be waiting for example, I would humbly suggest that we should not wait for America to wake up and vote Donald Trump out. I don't think we should wait for that. Because I think if we wait for that, we might be disappointed. I'm saying something in a kind of backhanded way, if you can see what I'm saying. So soul is an inside job. Soul doesn't depend on who's in the White House, who's in number 10, who's doing this, who's doing that. Yes, there's more to it than that, but I just wanted to say I think soul is an inside job. That's my point, really.
And to give the complete 100% opposite perspective as well, soul is an inside job, absolutely. What I work with and what I believe that Richard works with can be described in a very generalized way as, and it's going to sound a very flippant term, but as magic with a small m, not a capital M. But by magic, it's a very misused term. It is the power of intent. To hold the intent. Not to have a good intention, but to hold your intent. To intend something to happen, to dream something in. The power of positive thought. Again, I'm not a hippie. I've been one, but I'm not now. The power of positive thought. It really can attract things into your life, and you can dream things in. So think positive. It does work.
I don't disagree with that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that brings me on to the whole idea of we kind of have to, do you both think that people have to start embracing all of these other tools, you know, like spirituality and astrology, numerology? We have to kind of shift the way we view reality, right? Because now that we know reality isn't just materialist, it's not just physical, it's non-physical as well. So it works on, so for example, what you think about, your thoughts that you're sending out, you're drawing back into your life, and that's the law of attraction. So do you think people should start learning about these fields more?
It beats prayer. You've got a lot of people out there who pray to God or pray to whatever divine form they choose to believe in, and go, oh, please let me help this, please make this happen for me. Whereas I have a great relationship with the divine. I have a great relationship with divinity, but I call it the upstairs department. I don't have any truck with God. And I have a great relationship with, for example, the upstairs parking attendant. If I want a parking space 10 minutes before I pull up, I always book it in advance, and it's there because I ask for help. And that doesn't mean I pray, and I certainly don't give any supreme being any higher status than my own consciousness, but they're there to help us. When I say they, I mean what I call the upstairs department. Other people have separate names for it, and they're all pertinent and relevant. But don't put them on pedestals.
Yeah, the universe is beneficial. The universe is on our side. I mean, the world is going through tremendous difficulties. Individuals are going through tremendous difficulties. But if one thing would come out of all this, once it's all shaken down, if one thing could be got rid of, it would be the idea that God, or the upstairs department, is a punishing God. Because that's really the kind of, I know it's more subtle than this, but that's the old Christian conception that God is a punishing God. And if we could get rid of that, if that could be chucked out, along with the other things that get thrown out in the next few years, then we really would be in a better place. Because I don't see, because a lot of people think that their life is suffering, and that it's meant to be suffering, and that it can't be anything other than suffering. And okay, maybe it is hard, but a lot of people think that it can't be anything else, that it kind of shouldn't be anything else, but it can be something else. So
yeah, but you've got to give them the right to suffer if they really want to.
Sure thing, but not to inflict it on others, maybe.
No,
that would be the thing.
Masochism is a...
Yeah, not to preach it to others, though, maybe. That's the thing I perhaps am against.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the bottom line is that it's all about self-empowerment, isn't it? And with learning about these this field and the spiritual, anything to do with this, basically just learning about the energetic world and the spiritual field and how things actually work on a non-physical level, it does give you a lot of empowerment, because you do realize that you do have the power. You do have the power to change whatever it is that you within yourself and within the world. Obviously, not everything, but with I guess that's when the co-creative consciousness comes in, and then when you work together with other people who are also working on the same conscious level as you, then that's when the magic starts happening, right?
If you don't have the power now, you can find it. That's the point, really.
And there's also the disempowerment as well. I take us back to the time, quite a few years ago now, the 3 million strong march against the Iraq War, which Tony Blair just totally whitewashed and ignored. And it made 3 million people on one day feel totally unlistened to and disempowered. But at the end of the day, those 3 million people came through and they were proved right, and Tony Blair was proved wrong. And perhaps the same thing is happening now with the climate change protests that are going on. The politicians just aren't listening. And they are so long a losing streak on this one, because the youth will have its way. This is going to happen.
That's a really positive note to end on. We're going to go into the interactive session. Do you guys still want to say anything before we do that? And are there any questions from the audience? Any questions? Yeah?
I've got a question. So it might sound really naive because I don't know much about what you do, but how did numerology and astrology help you, if it did, discover the bigger picture? If that makes sense.
How did the astrology help you discover the bigger picture? How did it allow you to see beyond the immediate?
Oh, well, I can answer that in two brief sentences. The two oldest tenets of astrology: the microcosm is reflected in the macrocosm, and as above, so below. You see the patterns out there, they reflect what's going on in here, every time.
When you see enough people who are number 3 or number 5 or number 7 or ruled by 8 or whatever it is, and you keep seeing the same kind of things, you see the proof in the end, I suppose is what I'm saying. It proves itself in the end when you do it enough. You look at your own numbers, okay, that makes some kind of sense. You show your mates, oh yeah, that's some kind of sensible. But when you've seen thousands of people over years, and you're seeing pattern recognition, you're seeing patterns play out before you, and not to be disempowering, because this is all about we can change, but when you see the influence of certain numbers and how it's so hard for certain people to get past those numbers again and again and again and again and again, different people, different places, different cultures, different ages, rich, poor, young, old, male, female, intelligent, not so intelligent, none of that matters. None of that matters. It comes down to the numbers at the end of the day for me. So it's recognising the forces in action.
I'm sure that many of you here will be familiar with the great author Terry Pratchett. In one of Terry Pratchett's book, there was a retrophrenologist. A phrenologist is someone who reads what's going on for you by the bumps on your head. A retrophrenologist is someone, you tell him your problems and he gives you the bumps on the head to go with it. Now, that sounds like it's fun. It is funny, but it's kind of pertinent to what we're talking about here. People come to you, not so much with problems, but with ways of viewing their outstanding issues, and they're looking for a more objective, detached and impersonal way of recognising what's going on for them, and to see if you can help them help themselves. And normally, if you're good enough, you can. But at the end of the day, they go away and then they think, well, that was really interesting. I really got a lot out of that. And then they go away, and after a day or two, it's like, oh yeah, what did he say? Oh yeah, I can't remember. Oh well, carry on. And sometimes it takes that reinforcement and reinforcement and reinforcement to get it through to people that they do have the power to make changes in their lives for themselves. It's much like dealing with someone who's trying to give up smoking or give up drinking or something like that. It is a question of individual self-determination and willpower at the end of the day. A comment?
Yeah,
Sure.
sure.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions? Okay, one at the back.
I've come a bit late, so I'm not sure if you've spoken about it. I know Steve wrote a book about Pluto, and you dedicated quite a lot of your research to Pluto as the planet representing power. You've been talking a lot about power and the transformation of power. Pluto is moving out of Capricorn in 2023, is that right, Steve? So, if you could comment a little bit on Pluto as the symbol of power and how you feel it ties into the processes of us discovering inner power, and then perhaps comment on the transformation of a movement of Pluto into Aquarius. Thank you.
On the negative side, Pluto deals with intensity and extremes, crises and trauma, obsession and compulsion. On the neutral side, it deals with transformation, purging, detoxing, cleansing, purifying and eliminating. And on the positive side, it deals with regeneration, rebirth, shape-shifting, metamorphosis, phoenix rising out of the ashes. Pluto moving into Scorpio in 1983 to 1995 saw a complete transformation of sexual attitudes and a complete transformation of the way we manage nuclear power. When Pluto moved into Sagittarius in 1995 to 2008, we saw the beginning of the end for organised religion and the rise of fundamentalism, as well as a lot of changes around ideas concerning truth, philosophy and religion. Pluto moving into Capricorn from 2008 to 2023 is seeing a forced change in the way that we organise our structures, whether they be governments, corporations, or the way we deal with the big organisations that impact on our lives. With Saturn now in Capricorn and coming up to Pluto, and indeed with Pluto going retrograde in 5 days' time and Saturn going retrograde tomorrow, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is now at its strongest that it's going to be for the next 6 months. It's going to be exact in January of next year. So the idea of transformation of structure and revolutionising boundaries, changing of boundaries from concrete and steel into rubber and elastic is going on now. And when Pluto moves into Aquarius in 2023, by which time Saturn will be leaving Aquarius, then hopefully we will genuinely start to see the long fabled age of Aquarius. And I don't want to sound too twee about it, but I'm quite looking forward to it because I think it's going to sort of change the way we organise communities at a global level. And not a moment too soon, to quote Terence McKenna.
Yeah, so numerology says that the first 22 or 23 years of every century are century defining, basically. So 2022 will be a kind of marker post. So as far as numerology is concerned, what is seeded between 2000 and 2022 kind of is not fixed, but kind of the dice has been rolled, and then 2023 is the beginning of how we play with those dice. In terms of magnitude, numerology would still say that 2022, 2023 would still be less significant than 2020. Numerology definitely puts the onus on 2020 as being the year where the transformation occurs.
Yeah, astrology backs that up as well.
So, a question for you both: how should we prepare for that? I mean, I know there's many ways, but
practice being Teflon coated. How do we prepare for that?
This is why soul's an inside job, as far as I'm concerned. I can only say how I'm preparing for it. Soul is an inside job, and if you're looking at the affairs of the world and hoping for a certain outcome in 2020 or before that or around a certain issue, well, you know, you might get your desired outcome, but the consequences of your desired outcome might be pretty serious, and then you don't get your desired outcome, and the consequences for somebody else are pretty serious. So the problem we have now is that with a lot of things that are going on in the world, there isn't a good outcome as such, because somebody wins, somebody else loses, the person that loses doesn't like it, split. So this is why I see that soul is an inside job, because really, having been interested in it and caring about it for a long time, I can probably say in certain world events, I'm kind of past caring, because not in a defeated way, but in a way, but even if I get the outcome that I want, how does that affect my own development? And the answer is, it probably doesn't. How do we prepare? We get to work on ourselves. That's what I'm doing. That's all I can say.
From an astrological perspective, 2018, 2019 and 2020 show increasing levels of challenge, difficulties, leading to some type of breakthrough point around the end of 2020, start of 2021. But it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I'm unusually down on this one. So when you say to me, how can we best work our way through the short-term future, bearing in mind that we are going to see fundamental shifts in systems of governance worldwide over the next 18 months to 24 months. If you're going to be in built-up areas where there's huge population concentrations and there's going to be an element of apparent disorder in certain ways, then the best thing you can do is smile at your neighbours, work with people collectively, be open and transparent with everyone, and just be as good as you can be. Because that is the way to guarantee a good community and to dream the future in. People who are scared or isolationist or xenophobic, they're not doing themselves or their community any favours at all. And this is not a long-term transformation. This is the thin end of the wedge. We've been building to this time for a long time, possibly since as far back as the 15th century, and certainly since the end of the First World War. And what Richard said about 22, 23, so much happened in this country, in England, in 1922 and 1923, that it was such an important time, and we're going to head into similar times again. But I choose to feel that this is going to see a positive outcome. And I've got a 20-year-old granddaughter, so I want this to be a positive outcome.
Yeah, thank you for that. Right, so we're going to get into the interactive part of the evening, where basically we will look at our star signs and our life path numbers, and we will actually, this paper at the front, so I want you guys, what we can do is draw a sort of a triangle, and on one part of the triangle you can put your numerology, your life path number that Richard will tell you how to calculate, and on the other side your star sign. And then at the end, both Steve and Richard are going to go through each one of the signs and the numbers, and we'll tell you what are the main characteristics, sort of general characteristics about this particular sign or number. And at the top, I also want you to put some information about you as a child. So some of the things that you used to do as a child when you were really, really young. What are the things that you used to play with? Some basic characteristics that you remember that you were, because that also gives you a sort of an insight, as I said at the very beginning, of the overall blueprint about you know, what you came here to do, sort of learning a little bit more about yourself. So we'll take 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back to the panel. Yeah, Richard, can you just quickly explain how people can calculate the number?
Sure. So let's try and keep this simple. There's many numbers that you can calculate to get a good numerology reading. Excuse me, with varying levels of detail and complexity, but let's keep it super simple. And let's just work with the day that you were born on. Let's keep this super accessible and simple. The day you were born on. So for example, the the 4th, the 17th, the 23rd, the 29th, whatever it is, whatever the day you were born on. Forget the month, forget the year for this. Take the number of the day you were born on. If you were born on the 22nd of any month, then the number that we want to work with is 22. So if you're born on the 22nd, then your number is 22. If you were born on the 11th, then your number is 11. So 22 and 11, they stay as special numbers, they stay as they are. Any other number, you take the digits and add them together. So if you're born on the 14th, 1 plus 4 is 5. If you're born on the 17th, 1 plus 7 is 8. 19th, 1 plus 9 is 10, but add that again, 1 plus 0 is 1. Make sense? So everybody will have either a number 1 through 9, or 11, or 22. That's all we want to land up with.
Yeah.
Okay?
And Steve, do you think people should find out their ascending or descending, or that be too complicated?
The easiest way to find out your ascendant or descendant or the midheaven without going to an astrologer or without consulting tables is just to work out, if you know your time of birth, then you can work out, if you were born at midday, then the sun is going to be overhead. If you were born at sunrise, then the sun is going to be on the sunrise point. If you're born at sunset, then the sun's on the sunset point. And wherever the point of the sun's orbit is at the time of your birth, that's your ascendant. So if you're born at midday, the ascendant is 3 signs before your sun sign. If you're born at sunset, the ascendant is the opposite sign to your sun sign. It's quite simple, really. And I can do this, it is simple, and I can do this on the spot. If anyone needs any help, it will take me about 3 or 4 seconds to do it, literally. So come and see me during the break.
Okay, great. Thank you. So 10 minutes, and then we'll come back to the panel.
So the number that you've got is a pathway to find your thing. The number that you've got is not your thing, it's the pathway to your thing. That's really the way to think about it. So I'll keep this very brief and very simple so that you can just write down a few words for each of the numbers or for the number that you've got. So if the number that you've got is 1, then this suggests that you're going to be good at leadership and independence. And that if you're not displaying leadership and independence, and you've got the number 1, well, try it, and you might find that it works out quite well. If you've got number 1, one of the particular things which is valuable to try to think about is self-employment. Self-employment and entrepreneurship, freelance, doing your own thing, going your own way, that's the essence of the number 1. So if 1 is your number, try and be that, do that. If 2 is the number, then you are asensitive. It means that you are a natural intuitive, natural feelings orientated person, naturally emotional, but naturally good at non-verbal communication. So always, if your number is 2, then it's really important to try to go through life guided by your feelings. Don't always try and use your mind. Be comfortable using your gut. Be comfortable using navigating with how you feel about stuff, if 2 is your number. Be happy, become accustomed to being a sensitive and intuitive. If 3 is your number, then 3 is the number of communication. So if 3 is the number, you need to write a book, and then a second book, and then a third book, and then you need to stand on stage and give a talk, and you need to paint pictures and dance and perform and basically just be a kind of outrageous show-off in some way, shape or form. And if you don't quite want to do that, then certainly if 3 is your number, you've got to express yourself. 3 is the number of self-expression, to the point where if a 3 can't express themselves, doesn't feel they're able to, or doesn't know how to, it can cause enormous difficulties in the person. So if 3 is the number, express, create, communicate, write, perform. It will make your life better. 4. If 4 is your number, 4 is the number of earth and groundedness and structure and practicality. If you could imagine that a number 1 would have an invention and they would say, let's invent these things called chairs. The number 1 would say, wow, fantastic thing, chairs. And number 2 would say, well, chairs, I'm not really sure about that, I'm not feeling it, I'm not really thinking that that's a good idea, I'm a bit uncertain, the number 2 would say. The number 3 would say, well, the number 3 wouldn't shut up about it. The number 3 would tell all their mates about this new thing called chairs and how great they were going to be. But nobody's built anything yet. Nobody's actually done anything about it, and that falls to the number 4. The number 4, born on the 4th, born on the 13th, born on the 31st. These are the people that make stuff. They actually build it, make it, fix it, put it back together again. So it's a very physical, it's a number of physicality and materiality. Often, not always, but often, people who have a number 4 are not really interested in this kind of stuff because they can't grab hold of it, they can't touch it, it's not real enough for them. 5. If 5 is your number, well, if 5 is your number, then we've got problems, because 5 is the number of rebelliousness. Rebellion against the system, against the machine. 5 is the number of change. Where 4 was conformity, 5 is non-conformity. You can make numerology, astrology comparisons. I won't go on too much about it, but you can put some of the planets and some of the signs and some of the numbers together. The most obvious one is with 5, which is very, if you know your astrology, very Martian, very Mars orientated. So 5 people, it's all about action, doing, business, travel, confrontation, rebellion, what they don't like, standing up to turn things on their head. Sometimes, if you have a number 5, you lead a very ordinary life because you feel that you have to, because you've kind of signed up to that and you don't feel you can get out of it. But if you're a number 5 and you lead an ordinary life, then somewhere or another you will be rebelling. You will be doing minor acts of rebellion somewhere or other, and you should. That's as it should be. That's absolutely as it should be. 6. If 6 is your number, 6 is the number of family, community, togetherness, looking after other people. Lots of doctors, nurses, paramedics, things like that are of the number 6. Always with the number 6, so if you ask a number 6 person, how are you, how's it going, their response will often include how all the people in their family are doing. Yeah, but I never asked you how your mum was, I asked you how you were. But a number 6 person will often tell you how their loved ones are, because how their loved ones are is vital to how they are. And all right, we're all a bit like that, but 6s are really like that, a lot. In the tarot, because you can mix a lot of different disciplines together, in tarot cards, card number 6 is the Lovers. And that indicates how 6s are all about togetherness with other people, cooperation, not going it solo. They don't like to go on their own. Unlike 7s, who really should go on their own. Well, you know, maybe not all the time, but 7 is definitely the number of the person who in some way does not fit in. Brief explanation of that to kind of give you a clue of how we think about numerology. If you imagine this floor, right, was covered in carpet tiles. If we put down 4-sided square carpet tiles, it would cover the floor evenly. Yeah, everything would fit together nicely. If you had 6-sided carpet tiles, take it from me, you know, hexagons, take it from me, they'd all fit together nicely and there'd be no gaps and no overlaps and no nothing. If you have a 7-sided carpet tile, apart from it looking a bit weird, what would happen? It wouldn't fit in with all the other carpet tiles. So a 7-sided carpet tile will not fit in with other 7-sided carpet tiles or with other carpet tiles either, which mathematically proves that 7s aren't of the group. They're of doing things their own way, thinking their own way. Now, they can be community orientated, but what happens is that they go off, have their own ideas, do their own thing, think about it for a year or 2, and then come back and get involved and do their stuff. But it's all going on in here in the land of the number 7. All going on in the land up here. And that's as it should be. That's as it should be. 8. If your number is 8. So in Chinese versions of numerology, they recognise 8 as being the number of money. And in the Western system, we always think about 8 as being the number of money and of power. So often, people who have an 8 will be strong characters. It's the number of the person who is a dominant, forceful personality. They are a boss. Whether they are actually a boss or not is another story, but they have those boss kind of tendencies in their life, and they know how to get stuff done. If 8 is your number, find something that you can boss. Find something that you can take charge of and make it so as you want it to be. 9. 9 is the highest single number. So we always think of 9 as being quite a high level number, really, because it includes all the other numbers. So if 9 is your number, then really it's all about humanitarianism. It's all about healing. It's all about helping other people. Often to the point where the 9 person doesn't know how to help themselves. So people who have a 9, they're sometimes not so good with the old boundaries, because they're all about sorting everybody else out and forgetting to sort themselves out. That can be a thing with 9. They need to get the balance with that, but they don't need to be selfish. They need to be in the business of helping other people, and then their life gets better if they do that. We've then got 2 special cases. If you're born on the 11th or you're born on the 22nd, you've got a master number. 11 and 22 are recognised as master numbers in numerology, which brings a whole load of extra goodness and a whole load of trouble as well. Because if you've got a master number, it means that your life will not be, probably, straightforward. It means that your life, more than others that you know, will experience a series of great highs and great lows and great reversals and great achievements. Because as a master number, you're here, really, 11 or 22, to sort other people out. Now, there's lots to unpick here, which we don't really have time to do. If we're here all night, we wouldn't have time to do it, because 11s and 22s feel, it's not even feel, they know, they will say, they know what's best. They know what needs to be done. And we might say, well, no, you don't, mate. But they will say, ha, actually, I totally do. Now, 11s could be a little bit more reserved about this. So the knowings that 11s have can sometimes be quieter and not so outrageous in their expression. But the knowings of a 22 will probably, almost like being punched in the face, because it's that strong from them. But this is a good thing, because 11s and 22s are here to help the rest of us get our act together. Primarily, if your number is 11, you have to self-care, because 11 is very sensitive, very aware, very intuitive, feels the pain of the world. It's classic 11 to walk down the street 100 yards and feel the weight of the world on top of their shoulders. That's a very 11 thing to do. Interaction with people can be very challenging if you're 11, because if people are toxic, the 11 picks up the toxicity, so 11s have to self-care. 22s have to not self-sabotage. So a really big thing about 22 is that really nobody can stop them other than themselves. So if your number is 22, what you've really got to do is make sure that you're not tripping yourself up. And that's the thing for all numbers, but 22, like a lot, they trip themselves up the most. They trip themselves up more than other people will trip them up. That's a big thing for 22. And if 22 can get a hold of that, well, they can do tremendous things. They can do amazing things, really, because it's a high vibration number. Any questions? Friend at the back?
What if you feel like all of them apply to you a lot, apart from number 2?
We're all a mixture of a few different numbers.
But everything you described, I feel like they all apply to me, like, extremely.
Though I did notice a particular reaction with one of the numbers.
7.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that one's like over the top extremely. I'm a 7, but I'll be like the rest of it. I'll be like walking down the road as a 7 with the weight of the world on my shoulders, thinking about family. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and you're right to say it. But you see, this is where it's really interesting, and I can't really prove this, but this is where it's interesting, where people are so different. Because yeah, I can go out down the street and feel the weight of the world on my shoulders, but not like an 11 does. Not like an 11 does. And as a 7 or any other number, you can have good communication skills, but not like a 3. And I don't mean that in a big up way. I mean it in the sense that 3s don't know when to shut up.
She's a freak.
So we're all a mixture of different numbers, but we're going to be stronger with certain numbers than we are with others. And that's just the point I'm trying to make, really. Steve.
Richard, when I'm playing with a compass and a ruler, I'm trying to make different patterns using various geometry patterns. I've studied it a long time, various forms of sacred geometry. And you can make any number of sided patterns except 7 with a pencil and a compass. 7 is the only one of the first 10 numbers you cannot make a pattern with a pencil and a compass. So 7 stands out in sacred geometry as being the number of the unusual, the different, the odd one out. And that fits very well with what you were saying.
Absolutely. There's a million examples of how 7, the natural inclination of 7 is to separate, to go its own way, to drift off in some way. Mathematically, it's proven, really. Yeah, thank you.
Just some confirmation, unless you're born on the 11th and the 22nd of the month, all other dates you're adding up to the final number, yeah?
Yeah, so for this, all we want to do is, if you're born on the 11th, your number is 11. If you're born on the 22nd, your number is 22. Anything else, add the digits together until you get a single digit. So the 10th is 1. The 19th is 1. The 29th is 11. 2 plus 9 is 11. And then stick at 11. Stay at 11, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, the other question is, do these traits apply to the month we were born or not?
No, not really. No.
And if your year is the same as your number of your day, does that mean?
Okay, so there's lots of things you can do in numerology. This is like, slightest introduction to it. All sorts of combinations of your date of birth will be able to tell us something, the year of birth, the month and the year of birth, the day and the month of birth. And then, of course, you've got your name, which we haven't even touched on, of turning the letters of the name into numbers, adding those up and seeing what that computes to. So there's a whole world here which we're just scratching the surface of. Okay, I hope that's some help and you've got your first section of the triangle filled in. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That was fascinating. Did you guys find it interesting? It's helpful, right? Okay, now we're going to do the other side of the triangle with the star signs. So Steve, please.
Okay, a couple of things first of all, before we do the ascendants, is I do a lot of horoscopes of nations, because it's easy to find out when a nation comes into existence. Some nations it's really easy. Others who've been around for thousands of years, it's not so easy. Like many countries in this planet of ours came into existence on the 1st of January. So when you find a country like Australia declared its independence and became a nation on the 1st of January. So when you find nations that are born on the 1st, and I hear what Richard's saying about how this leads to independence, and that speaks fine. But then you find countries like the US of A, which came into existence on the 4th of July. And America has yet to fulfill its promise when it comes to doing as opposed to talking. It will in the future, I'm sure. And the other thing I want to comment on is someone came up to me at the break and said, yeah, I was born the same day as someone famous. And do astrological twins matter? There's a couple of correlations here. There's 3 examples I'm going to give you. Lenny Henry was born the same day, same year, and when you adjust the time zones, the same hour as Michael Jackson. And if anyone is old enough to remember Lenny Henry doing the Thriller video for Comic Relief about 25 years ago, you'd have seen how good he was. You understand the similarity. Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker, was born the same day, same year, same hospital, same hour as Christopher Reeve, who played Superman. And Sylvester Stallone was born the same day, same year, same hospital, same 20 minutes as G.W. Bush. One of them's a mad cowboy actor who's trying to save the world from terrorists. The other one's an actor, yeah. Astrological twins do work, but they're all different. Anyway, when Richard was talking, I was listening to him and I was thinking, yeah, these numbers, they bear certain relations to certain characteristics of individual ascendants. What do I mean by the ascendant? Let me define it in a different way. The planets in the heavens, they're lumps of rock or balls of gas that orbit in a certain pattern in a way that is not random, I assure you. And they influence us by creating patterns which we act to or we react to. Acting is better than reacting. But beyond that, there's 4 very important points in astrology. There's the sun, the moon, the ascendant or rising sign, as it's sometimes known, and the midheaven. Now the sun represents your core, your soul, your heart, the part of you that is absolutely unique, unaffectable and untouchable by anyone else under any circumstances whatsoever. So when you see people who have got, they might be a Leo, but they've got 4 planets in Cancer and 3 planets in Virgo and only the sun in Leo, and they feel nothing like a Leo, but they're a Leo, you understand why they feel disaffected. They've only got the sun in one sign. The moon reflects the light of the sun onto the earth. So the moon reflects the light of the sun out of the individual. The sign and the house of the moon in your horoscope shows the way that you express your feelings and emotions. It's not the way you are, but it's the way you express yourself at an emotive and feelingful level. The ascendant, the sign of the zodiac that is rising on the horizon, on the eastern horizon at the moment of your birth. The ascendant is the armour you put on as you go outside the front door. It is not the way you are, but it is the way you are seen as being at the day-by-day level, the way you interact with the world at the minute-by-minute level. The midheaven, the middle of the heavens, the highest point of the sun's orbit at the moment of your birth, the most visible point of the sun's orbit at the time of your birth. This is the public image, the way you project, promote, advertise and sell yourself as being, the way you want the world to see you as being. It's not the way you are, it's the way you want the world to see. It's the way you market yourself. So the sun is your identity, the moon is your feelings, the ascendant is your armour and the way you interact with the world, and the midheaven is your public image. It's very easy and very boring to give character definitions according to individual sun signs. Everyone knows their sun sign. You can read it in the bloody Daily Mail. Or Daily Nazi, as I like to call it. The ascendant or rising sign is a very different feature. It shows how you interact with the world at the minute-by-minute level. It shows the way you engage with the world. Now, the thing about the ascendant is that it often, not always, but often, is demonstrated by the physical appearance. So, because we live in a country that's relatively quite far north, 51, 52 degrees north, because of the, I'm not going to go into the mechanics of it, but because the Earth is tilted at 23 degrees, if you're born on the equator, then each sign takes 2 hours to come up on the horizon. If you're born around the latitude of Britain, then certain signs come up a lot longer than others. For example, Virgo and Libra take nearly 3 hours to come up on the horizon each day in the UK, whereas Pisces and Aries only take 45 to 50 minutes. In New Zealand, it's the opposite effect. Aries and Pisces are much more common on the ascendant. Virgo and Libra are much rarer, which is why in this country, only 1 in 25 people have Pisces, Aquarius, Aries, Taurus rising, whereas 1 in 7 have Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, or Leo rising. It's much easier to recognize people by their ascendant rather than their sun sign. And the classic trap that astrologers fall into is when people come up to them and go, go on then, guess my sun sign. And you get it, and you guess it, and they go, no, you're wrong, and what you've guessed is their ascendant because of the way they look. So here's a guide to how each ascendant expresses itself in terms of appearance, but also demonstrates itself in the outside world. Aries rising, remember there's relatively few of these, they always have the high eyebrow line, the arched eye, the eye socket is very round, and there's a strong high eyebrow socket that looks like the goat's horns, the ram's horns. And Aries rising is always characterized by having a strong forehead, and often a few scars and bumps on the head as well because of their consistent head banging and diving in head first, because that is a feature of Aries rising. Taurus rising is normally characterized by having a strong neck. The neck will not just be straight and narrow, but it'll be extending into the shoulders, and there's normally a big, strong shoulders as well. Think of the bull. And then you've got Taurus rising. And Taurus rising people are characterized by not necessarily their possessiveness, but their attention to detail around value systems. What are things worth? What is the value of this? Is this important to me or not? Gemini rising people often have very long, thin, slippery necks. It's to accommodate that slippery tongue. You know, they're very good at talking, very good with media, very fast thinking. They never stop to think how they feel. They're too busy talking and imagining and creating and communicating. So when I hear Richard talk about how number 3 is the sign of communication, I think, well, Gemini's the 3rd sign, and Gemini rising people, they're like hamsters on a wheel. You know, they never stop thinking. It's a non-stop verbal diarrhea with Gemini rising, and they can talk for Britain. They can talk for any country. But when they stop to analyse and go beneath the superficial mental chitter-chatter and look for a deeper meaning or a higher philosophy, then often they have to stop and go and step back into their corner a little bit. Cancer rising people often have the full moon face. They often have quite a round face. Not always, but often. And it's one of those faces that's always smiling with big chubby cheeks, and it's a round circular face. But Cancer rising, always they seem to be easily affected by their environment, and they can switch moods just like that. One wrong look, one wrong word, especially first thing in the morning, that's it, they're in a bad mood. And if Cancer rising is an intelligent person, then they've got the strength to turn round to the people around them and say, look, I'm in a bad mood, leave me alone. Give me 5 minutes and I'll be all right. If you don't, I'll be like this all day. And yeah, it's very sensitive to environment. And of course, Cancer rising people value home. Not house, apartment, condominium, palace, bedsit, tent, home. And the really intelligent ones know that home starts in here. And they can't find it out there till they've got it in here. Leo rising, you can spot a mile off. They've all got big hair, and they always dress up before they go out, because if they look good, they feel good. Outer image counts. And it's not that they're arrogant or conceited. Well, the lower evolved ones are. But the more higher evolved are proud. Pride in oneself is not a negative attribute. It is a positive quality, because if you exude pride, if you know you're good, then you influence the world around you. So Leo rising, they'll always dress in they'll either have big hair or very nicely groomed hair, because the lion's mane, or they'll dress in gold, orange, yellow, the bold colours. Virgo rising, the analysts. I have Virgo rising. Virgo rising is never satisfied. More Virgo risings like me bite their nails than any other sign in the zodiac. In fact, more than the rest of the zodiac put together, because there's this perfectionist streak around Virgo rising. And there's always a kind of worried and hurried look, as if they're always being hustled about something and they can never quite get it right, and it's never going to be good enough. So Virgo rising, they need to actually say, look, I'm doing my best. And if that's not good enough, there's the door. But a lot of Virgo risings go through complexes in their life where they just feel persecuted because they're not being good enough. And it's actually themselves who do that persecution. So you're always doing your best. 98% is good enough, because if you had 100%, you'd have wings on your back. Libra rising people you can normally spot quite easily because they often have the lip, the lower lip, that protrudes down a bit, or they have a line, a horizontal line in between the lower lip and the jaw, or they have a vertical line in the middle of the jaw. This is the balance, the split point, because Libra rising people are the archetypal Librans in that they find it difficult to decide things. They can't make their mind up, and these physical features often show the dichotomy, the split personality. It's not split as in schizophrenic or something like that, but it is that they see both sides. And Libra rising people, they make the best arbitrators, referees, adjudicators, analysts, but at the same time, they like to keep everybody on board. Scorpio rising people have the penetrating eyesight, the gaze, the stare. If you're dealing with someone with Scorpio rising and they turn their stare on you, then you either tell them the absolute truth or you run, because that gaze can actually burn through solid steel. And the thing is, the Scorpio rising doesn't realise they're doing it. They might be a nice, gentle Cancerian or a placid Pisces, but they've got Scorpio rising, and they turn that gaze on you, and you think, oh, I'm on dodgy ground here. The Scorpio rising people does deal with absolutes. They can deal with no, they can deal with rejection. They can also deal with yes, but they don't deal with, I don't know, I can't deal with it, I'm not sure. That's anathema to them. They will cut you dead rather than deal with indecision. Sagittarius rising people, they've got high foreheads and they normally bounce when they walk. You see these people walking along the street and each time they take a step they bounce. They've got Sag rising because they bounce. Sagittarius rising people, they've normally got a somewhat irresponsible sense of humour about them that makes them naturally optimistic, or the complete opposite, a complete sort of down and out, but most of the time positive and optimistic. And Sagittarius rising people, they love humour, they love travel, they want their philosophies to be the guideline for the future. Capricorn rising people also have high foreheads, but often a very high hairline. These are the people whose hair will start halfway up their head, regardless of how old they are or what gender they are. And they're the people who have very high cheekbones. You see a lot of these people with very thin cheeks and high cheekbones, Capricorn rising every time. And these are the people who always will have pronounced bone structures, strong teeth, strong jaw, angular elbows. Capricorn rising, they always have sharp elbows. Great for jumble cells. Aquarius rising, this is almost always the case. Aquarius rising people have almond-shaped eyes. Aquarius rising people, they epitomise Aquarius. They're always interested in the unusual, the different, the odd, the innovative, the original, the futuristic. They're not so much interested in the conformity of the normal. And they always have eyes that have got 1/4 of the eye socket is straight, creating an oriental or an almond-shaped eyes. Pisces rising people, it's a bit of a weird one because half of them have these sort of hangdog, please don't pick on me, impersonation where they just sort of, you see them kind of shrivel up. Yet Pisces rising are the most intuitive, empathic, compassionate, sensual and sensitive signs of the zodiac. But they also got this fear of being persecuted. And Pisces rising, they're the people with the big eyes, the big wide open eyes, wide open to everything. but you look at them and think they could burst into tears at any moment. And they're quite common in this country, quite rare in this country. I often joke with my colleagues in Australia that the reason Australia's got so many Pisces rising and Aries rising is because Australia's got so many headbangers and alcoholics. Whereas they say to me, yeah, England's got all Virgo rising and Libra rising, which is why you can't make your mind up and you're also anal. But there's an element of truth in it all. Please remember when you're dealing with the ascendant and the rising sign. Well, the rising sign is the sign of the zodiac that is rising on the eastern horizon at the moment that you were born. The ascendant is the degree of that sign that is rising. The ascendant is actually 1 degree. The rising sign is the whole sign. They are one and the same thing. One is more specific than the other. The midheaven is a different case. The midheaven is the public image. It's the way you project yourself, and that's a different ball game. And it's always going to be approximately 3 signs away from the ascendant. I'm not going to go into the midheaven now. At this point, let me throw it open. Any questions on the ascendant?
I think that the degree of the ascendant would move from least evolved to most evolved expression of that sign. Is that a thing?
As I said, the rising sign is the sign that is coming up on the horizon. The ascendant is the degree of that sign that is coming up. And that degree is similar to a planet in that aspects to that degree will influence the way that you deal with the outside world and the way the outside world deals with you. For example, if you have planets opposite the ascendant, opposite the ascending degree, then if the ascendant is the relationship you have with yourself, then the descendant, the point that's setting on the opposite horizon, on the western horizon, is the relationship you have with other, whether that is personal and intimate, friends, social or professional. So if you're born around sunset, then your life is going to be very much centered around relationships. Whereas if you're born around sunrise, it's going to be very much centered around the relationship you have with yourself. If that helps.
Planets in the first house, can they affect this?
The ascendant is always the start of the first house. The houses of the zodiac, numbered 1 to 12. Planets are energies. The signs of the zodiac that the planets are in at the time of your birth show the way that those energies manifest in and through you, the way you behave. The houses of the zodiac show the way that the outside world sees you as behaving. It's the way you demonstrate that behavior into the outside world. The aspects between planets show how individual energies help and hinder each other at the day-by-day level. So there's planets, signs, houses, and aspects. And it's possible to do a horoscope without putting planets in signs or without putting planets in houses, just looking at the aspects, because the aspects are the real behavior indicators. And the signs and the houses are the decoration, if you like. But it's every house has its different meaning relating to the sign, like the first house relates to Aries, the 7th house relates to the 7th sign of Libra, the 10th house relates to the 10th sign of Capricorn. And when Richard was talking, I was listening and I was thinking there's so many similarities here between the numerological patterns and the astrological patterns. And I definitely think there's an interplay and an overlay here between the two. And this is a great field of work for future development, I think. And I'd love to do some work on this in the future. Any more questions?
Is the ascendant more dominant at a particular time of your life? I heard somewhere that it's for the first 30 years or something. There's more.
That's a really good question. I'd have to say yes. The ascendant is a lot more dominant in the first 28, 29 years of life until the Saturn return, age 29, because I experience through my readings that people don't really know themselves properly until they've reached the Saturn return at age 29. So they're dealing with the outside world in a kind of experiential way. So they're dealing with it through their ascendant rather through their sun sign. Once they're 29, 30 and they've been through the Saturn return, then they can look in the mirror and go, right, I know who I am now, or at least I've got an idea. Let's start being me. At which point the sun sign kicks in. Good question though. I had to think about that one. Nice one. Anyone else, please? Right, I'm out of here.
Thank you guys so much. That was fascinating insight into both astrology and numerology, and it was really interesting to see them how they work together and all the correlations that happen that are there between them. Yeah, that was really, really interesting. So the last one, which was about childhood, was basically just to make you think a little bit about you as a child, because as I said in the very beginning, for me and from what I've seen, that represents pretty much you as a soul. You come in as a soul, and that's before we're molded into the person that we're supposed to be and the society wants us to be. So this is just something for you to think about, because I found it very helpful to learn more about myself and what I'm kind of here to do, or what I want to do, what I'm passionate about. So we're going to take a short 5-minute break, after which we'll have some really interesting films and documentaries from international filmmakers. They're centered around the idea, the concepts of passion and finding your passion and purpose, because of course that was really the idea behind tonight, and learning more about ourselves. So I think it would be really good if you guys could stay. Yeah, thank you.